Our beautiful America was built by a nation of strangers from 100 different places or more. They have poured forth into an empty land, joining and blending in one mighty and irresistible tide.
Immigration has played an important role in the history of the United States. The United States had had a relatively open immigration policy during the 18th and early 19th centuries, and rarely questioned it until the late 1800s. From 1820 until the start of the Civil War in 1861, almost 1.8 million immigrants had entered the United States, with many coming from Germany, Great Britain, and Ireland. After certain U.S. states began passing their own immigration policies following the Civil War, in 1875 the Supreme Court declared regulation of immigration a federal responsibility to establish rules and conditions for immigration and citizenship. As the number of immigrants rose in the 1880s and economic conditions declined in many areas of the nation, Congress began to pass immigration legislation. The 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution defined national and state citizenship for the very first time and gave Congress the authority to regulate naturalization. The 14th Amendment was ratified on July 9, 1868, and granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, which included former slaves recently freed in America. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was signed into law by President Chester A. Arthur and was the first significant law restricting immigration into the United States. The law barred immigration of Chinese for a period of 10 years and banned Chinese people living in the U.S. from gaining citizenship. Stemming from the California gold rush, racial tensions increased as more and more Chinese emigrated, occupied jobs, and created competition on the job market. Between 1880 and 1890, more than 5.2 million immigrants entered the United States, and by 1890, 15% of the U.S. population is foreign-born, and in 1891, the Bureau of Immigration was established under the U.S. Treasury Department. In 1892, Ellis Island in New York was opened to screen immigrants that were seeking to enter the United States on the East Coast. In 1905, Angel Island opened to screen immigrants entering the United States on the West Coast. Between 1902 and 1917, certain requirements such as knowledge of the English language and literacy tests were placed on immigrants. Over the course of 1917 to 1929, quotas and limitations were enacted that restricted immigrants from certain nationalities and countries from entering the U.S., and the Japanese were made ineligible for citizenship. It wasn't until 1924 that Native Americans were considered citizens of the United States. In 1943, the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed, but limitations and quotas still remained in effect. In 1952, the Immigration and Nationality Act was passed that altered the almost unchanging immigration policies dating back to the ratification of the 14th Amendment and put previously disorganized immigration policies into one complete document. Despite President Harry S. Truman's veto, the act was passed by Congress and it formed the basis of our current immigration laws. The act gave preference to immigrants with specialized labor skills, relatives of immigrants that were already U.S. citizens, immigrants from certain world regions, and refugees. It was Congress's way to control immigration in the U.S. and ended the ban of Asian immigrants coming into America. From 1952 until 1965, the government did not enact any significant changes to the immigration process or policies.
After many years of barely any changes to the immigration process, in 1965, modifications were made to the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act. The 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act was also known as the Hart-Celler Act. The act was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson on October 3, 1965, at the base of the Statue of Liberty.
This bill that we will sign today is not a revolutionary bill. It does not affect the lives of millions. It will not reshape the structure of our daily lives or really add importantly to either our wealth or our power. Yet it is still one of the most important acts of this Congress and of this administration.
The act abolished the national origins quota system that was standard immigration policy since the 1920s. Instead, a preference system was enacted based on immigrants' skills, family relationships with U.S. residents or citizens, and refugees. Restrictions on foreigners entering the U.S. on visas were set at 170,000 per year with specific country of origin quotas. Four Chicano activists, Ernesto Galarraza, Cesar Chavez, Bert Corona, and Dolores Huerta, were instrumental in helping to convince Congress to pass the Hart-Celler Act. After 1965, immigration policy was impacted in several ways. In 1978, the two separate ceilings for immigrants coming from the eastern and western hemispheres were combined to make a total limit for immigration at 290,000 people. In 1980, refugees were removed as an immigrant preference category, lowering the immigration ceiling by 20,000 people, making the total ceiling for immigration at 270,000 people. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, illegal immigration was a big source of political debate. In 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act attempted to address the illegal immigration issue by providing better enforcement of immigration policies by provided amnesty for many illegal immigrants and creating policies that provided for greater opportunities for illegal immigrants to seek legal citizenship.
Today, tomorrow, and into the next century, our nation is the enduring dream of every immigrant who ever set foot on these shores and the millions still struggling to be free. This nation, this idea called America, was and always will be a new world, our new world.
The Immigration Act of 1990 provided the president to grant temporary protected status to immigrants from certain countries that might be afflicted with armed conflict or a natural disaster. It has been over 5 decades since the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 was passed. Since then, about 18 million legal immigrants have entered the United States of America. Since the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001 on the World Trade Center in New York City, America has enforced stricter land, sea, and air border control for all immigrants coming into America from all around the world. The security at airports has been increased since the terrorist attacks, limiting certain items from being taken on the planes and better security checks for people or immigrants entering the country or leaving the country. Today, more and more and more immigrants come into America every single day, making our country more diverse with all the cultures and customs the immigrants bring with them. This is making our country, the United States of America, a better place to live in with everyone around us.